Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold surface of the ancient stone monolith, feeling the rough texture of symbols that had puzzled xenoarchaeologists for over 3 decades. The markings covered every inch of the towering structure, spiraling upward in intricate patterns that seemed to dance before her eyes in the dim light of Kepler, 442b's twin suns. Still convinced these chicken scratches mean something, Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's lead linguist, approached with his usual skeptical expression. His boots crunched on the crystalline sand that covered most of this forgotten world. "We've run every analysis known to the Galactic Council. Pattern recognition, frequency analysis, mathematical correlations, nothing. The Zephyrians were right to dismiss this place." Sarah pulled her hand away and turned to face her colleague. Around them, the research team continued their methodical documentation of the site, their equipment humming quietly in the thin atmosphere. The Zephyrians dismiss anything they can't immediately understand or profit from. Just because their computers can't crack it doesn't mean it's meaningless. Webb gestured toward the monolith, one of hundreds scattered across the planet's surface. "Sarah, we've been here for 6 months. 6 months of scanning, sampling, and theorizing. The Council's patience is wearing thin, and frankly, so is mine. These markings show no linguistic structure, no mathematical progression, no artistic pattern. They're random scratches made by a dead civilization that probably used them for decoration." The argument was an old one between them. Webb represented the scientific mainstream, the careful methodology that had served humanity well since they'd joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Sarah represented something else, something the other species often mocked humans for. Intuition, gut feeling, the stubborn refusal to accept that some mysteries couldn't be solved. "Look at this sequence here," Sarah said, pointing to a section of the monolith where the markings seemed to cluster more densely, and this one over there. "They're not identical, but there's something similar about them. A rhythm maybe, or a flow." Webb sighed and activated his portable scanner, running it over the indicated areas. "I've scanned these exact spots dozens of times. The markings are carved at different depths, made with different tools, probably centuries apart. There's no connection. What if we're looking at this wrong?" Sarah walked around the base of the monolith, her eyes tracking the spiraling patterns. "What if it's not about the individual markings, but about the whole? What if each monolith is just one piece of a larger puzzle? That's pure speculation." All great discoveries start with speculation. The rest of the team had grown accustomed to these debates. Most sided with Webb, but a few junior researchers found themselves drawn to Sarah's enthusiasm. There was something about the markings that felt important, even if they couldn't explain why. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's newest member, approached with a tablet displaying orbital imagery. "Dr. Chen, I've been reviewing the satellite data. The distribution of monoliths across the planet isn't random. They follow specific geographical patterns, always near water sources or mineral deposits. That suggests purpose, not decoration." Webb shook his head. "Correlation isn't causation, Elena. Ancient civilizations built near resources because they needed them to survive. It doesn't mean the markings have meaning." Sarah studied the tablet, her excitement growing. "Show me the high-resolution scans of the northern continent cluster." Elena swiped through several images, displaying groups of monoliths arranged in seemingly chaotic patterns across vast plains and mountains. 47 structures in this region alone, all within a 100-kilometer radius. "There," Sarah pointed to the screen. "Look at how they're positioned relative to each other. It's not random. There's a deliberate spacing, an intentional arrangement. You're seeing patterns that aren't there," Webb said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The debate was interrupted by an urgent call from the orbital research station. Captain Reynolds, the mission commander, appeared on their communication screen with unusual excitement in his eyes. "Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, you need to see this. We've detected something unusual in the planet's electromagnetic field. There are fluctuations occurring at regular intervals, and they seem to be centered on the monolith sites." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "What kind of fluctuations?" "That's just it, we don't know. The patterns don't match any known natural phenomena or artificial signals. They're subtle, barely detectable even with our most sensitive equipment. We only notice them because we've been monitoring this planet so closely for your research." Webb frowned. "Are you suggesting the monoliths are generating electromagnetic fields?" "That's impossible. Our scans show they're made of ordinary stone." "I'm not suggesting anything yet," Reynolds replied. "But the timing is interesting. The fluctuations started 3 days ago, right around the time you began your detailed examination of the Northern Continent cluster, Sarah exchanged glances with Elena. Days ago was when they'd started using the new, deep penetration scanners, equipment designed to analyze the internal structure of the monoliths without damaging them. Captain, have you detected similar activity at any other monolith sites? Sarah asked. That's what's really strange. The fluctuations seem to be spreading. Sites that showed no activity 3 days ago are now generating weak, but measurable electromagnetic signatures. It's almost as if they're waking up, Sarah finished. Webb laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Sarah, you're talking about these things like they're alive. They're stone monuments left by a dead civilization. Are they? Sarah walked back to the monolith, placing both hands on its surface. What if we've been wrong about everything? What if these aren't monuments at all? What if there's something else entirely? Elena consulted her tablet again. Dr. Chen, if the electromagnetic activity is spreading from site to site, that would suggest some kind of communication network. A network that's been dormant for who knows how long, Sarah said, her mind racing, until we started poking around with our scanners. Until we triggered something. Webb's skepticism was wavering. The electromagnetic readings were real, measurable, undeniable. Even if that's true, we still can't read the markings. Without understanding what they say, we're still nowhere. Sarah smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of discovery. Maybe we don't need to read them, Marcus. Maybe we need to listen to them. As if responding to her words, a low hum seemed to emanate from deep within the monolith. It was barely audible, more felt than heard, but every member of the team noticed it. The markings on the stone seemed to shimmer slightly in the fading light of the twin suns. Something was definitely happening on Kepler 442b, and humanity was about to discover that they had stumbled onto something far more significant than ancient graffiti. The markings weren't meaningless at all. They were the key to something that would change everything humans thought they knew about intelligence, communication, and their place in the galaxy. The humming grew stronger over the next 48 hours, and with it came changes that made even the most skeptical team members take notice. The electromagnetic readings were no longer subtle fluctuations but powerful, rhythmic pulses that registered on equipment throughout their base camp. More disturbing was the fact that the pulses seemed to be affecting their technology in unexpected ways. The communication array is picking up interference on all frequencies, reported Lieutenant Torres, the team's technical specialist. Her usually steady hands shook slightly as she adjusted the controls. But it's not random static. There's a pattern to it, almost like what? Sarah asked, leaning over the console. Like music, complex harmonies that shift and change, but definitely structured. Dr. Webb stood at the window of their temporary laboratory, staring out at the nearest monolith. In the past 2 days, he'd watched his scientific worldview crumble piece by piece. The stone structures were definitely active now, emitting a soft, pulsing glow that was visible even in daylight. This is impossible, he muttered. Stone doesn't generate light. Stone doesn't create electromagnetic fields. Stone doesn't sing. Sarah joined him at the window. Maybe it's not stone. Maybe it just looks like stone. Our deep scans confirmed the mineral composition. It's definitely stone, just not stone as we understand it. Elena burst through the laboratory door, her tablet clutched in her hands and excitement written across her face. Dr. Chen, Dr. Webb, you have to see this. I've been analyzing the electromagnetic patterns from all the active sites, and I found something incredible. She activated the laboratory's main display screen, showing a 3-dimensional map of the planet with each monolith site marked as a glowing point. Lines of energy connected the points, creating an intricate web that covered the entire planet. It's a network, Elena said, her voice filled with awe. A planet-wide communication network. Each monolith is a node and they're all talking to each other. Webb studied the display with growing amazement. The complexity is staggering. There must be thousands of individual data streams. But what are they communicating? Sarah asked. Elena's excitement faltered. That's where it gets strange. The signals aren't carrying information in any way we can recognize. No data packets, no encoded messages, no mathematical sequences. It's almost as if the network itself is the message. Torres looked up from her communication equipment. Doctors, I'm getting reports from the orbital station. Captain Reynolds says the electromagnetic activity is extending beyond the planet's atmosphere. They're detecting signals reaching out toward the outer system. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How far out? The signals seem to be directed toward the asteroid belt. Specifically, toward a cluster of metallic asteroids that our preliminary surveys flagged as unusual. Webb grabbed his field equipment. We need to get to the northern continent cluster immediately. If this network is trying to communicate with something in the asteroid belt, we need to understand what we're dealing with. The team packed quickly and loaded their fastest transport. The flight to the northern continent took 3 hours, during which the electromagnetic activity continued to intensify. By the time they reached the cluster of 47 monoliths, the structures were glowing brightly enough to be seen from orbit. Landing near the central monolith, the largest in the cluster, Sarah immediately noticed that the markings on its surface were moving. Not physically changing, but shifting in appearance, as if different symbols were becoming prominent while others faded into the background. The markings are responding to something, she said, running her hands over the shifting patterns. They're highlighting different sequences. Elena set up her equipment and began recording the changes. The pattern shifts are synchronized with the electromagnetic pulses. It's like the monolith is trying to show us specific information. Webb approached another structure in the cluster and gasped. "Sarah, look at this one. The markings are completely different from what we recorded 6 months ago." She hurried over to see symbols that were definitely new, carved in the same ancient style but showing scenes that seemed almost contemporary. Crude representations of spacecraft, beings in environmental suits, and what looked remarkably like their own research equipment. "That's impossible," Webb said, but his voice lacked conviction. "These markings are carved into solid stone. They can't just appear, unless the stone isn't really stone," Elena said quietly. "What if these structures are made of some kind of programmable matter? Something that can reshape itself at the molecular level?" The implications hit them all at once. If the monoliths could alter their own structure, if they could create new markings, then they weren't ancient monuments at all. They were active systems, possibly even alive in some way. Tora's communication device crackled to life. "Ground team, this is Orbital Control. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Harrison needs to speak with Dr. Chen immediately." Sarah accepted the communication link, and the stern face of Admiral Harrison appeared on her portable screen. Behind him, she could see the bustling activity of Earth's primary space defense center. "Dr. Chen, I need a full report on the situation at Kepler 442b. We're receiving electromagnetic signatures from your location that are unlike anything in our databases. Admiral, we've discovered that the monoliths are part of an active communication network. They appear to be trying to establish contact with something in the asteroid belt." Harrison's expression grew grave. "Doctor, 3 hours ago our deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures from the direction of your system. Multiple objects are moving toward Kepler 442b at significant fractions of light speed. Whatever those monoliths are communicating with, it's responding." The team exchanged worried glances. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "How long until they arrive?" "Based on their current trajectory and velocity, approximately 18 hours. Webb stepped closer to the communication device. "Admiral, what kind of objects are we talking about?" "That's the problem, Dr. Webb. They're too large to be natural asteroids, but they don't match any known ship configurations from any species in the Galactic Council. The energy signatures suggest technology far advanced from anything we've encountered." Elena looked up from her equipment with alarm. The electromagnetic activity just spiked dramatically. All 47 monoliths in this cluster are now operating at maximum intensity. Sarah watched as the markings on the nearest structure continued to shift and change, telling a story in real time. New symbols appeared showing multiple objects approaching the planet, and what looked like a meeting or encounter. "Admiral," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I don't think we're dealing with ancient monuments. I think we're dealing with some kind of automated beacon system. The monoliths have been waiting here, dormant, until someone with sufficient technology arrived to activate them. Are you saying we triggered this? I'm saying we announced our presence and now something is coming to meet us." The humming from the monoliths grew louder, creating harmonies that seemed to resonate in their bones. The electromagnetic network was reaching full activation, and whatever message it had been designed to send was clearly being received. Webb stared at the approaching night sky, where several new stars had appeared since their arrival. "The question is, are they coming to welcome us or to determine if we're a threat?" As if in response to his words, the markings on every monolith in the cluster suddenly changed, showing the same image repeated hundreds of times across the ancient stones. A simple symbol that unmistakably represented two hands reaching toward each other in greeting. But whether it was an invitation or a warning, none of them could say. The approaching objects resolved into clarity 6 hours ahead of Admiral Harrison's predictions, their massive forms blocking out stars as they entered the Kepler 442 system. Dr. Sarah Chen stood with her team on a ridge overlooking the northern continent cluster, watching through telescopic equipment as 12 enormous vessels took up positions around the planet. "My God," Webb whispered, adjusting the telescope's focus. "They're not ships in any conventional sense. They look more like cities, floating cities." Each vessel was roughly spherical but covered in intricate geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living tissue. They were easily 10 kilometers in diameter, dwarfing the largest ships in humanity's fleet. More unsettling was the fact that their surfaces seemed to be covered in markings identical to those found on the monoliths. Torres received an urgent transmission from the orbital station. "Ground team," Captain Reynolds reports that the approaching vessels are attempting to establish communication. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously, but the signals are unlike anything in our translation databases. Sarah watched as the monoliths around them began to glow brighter, their electromagnetic output synchronized with the communications from the vessels above. "They're not trying to talk to us," she realized. "They're talking to the monoliths. This whole planet is one giant communication device." Elena's equipment registered a massive surge in the planetary network's activity. The data flow between the monoliths has increased by several orders of magnitude. It's like the entire system just came fully online. As they watched, the markings on the nearest monolith began to change again, but this time the transformation was dramatic. Instead of simple symbol shifts, entire sections of the stone surface seemed to liquefy and reform, creating new patterns with fluid grace. The process was beautiful and terrifying, defying everything they thought they knew about matter and energy. "Elena," Sarah said urgently, "are you recording this?" "Every second of it. But I don't think our instruments are sophisticated enough to capture what's really happening here." Webb lowered his telescope and turned to face his colleagues. "I've been wrong about everything. The markings, the monoliths, the purpose of this planet. We're not dealing with ancient monuments. We're dealing with active technology that's been waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Torres asked. Before anyone could answer, the air around them began to shimmer. The electromagnetic fields generated by the monoliths were becoming visible, creating rippling distortions in space that made the landscape appear to bend and flow. The effect was disorienting but not painful. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation in her mind, as if someone was gently probing her thoughts. "Is anyone else experiencing unusual sensations?" Elena nodded, her eyes wide. "It feels like something is trying to connect with me. Not threatening, just curious." The sensation grew stronger, and suddenly Sarah found herself understanding the markings on the monoliths without conscious effort. The symbols weren't a written language at all. They were a form of direct mental communication, a way of transferring concepts and ideas directly from mind to mind. "The markings," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're not meant to be read with the eyes. They're meant to be felt with the mind." As the realization hit her, the meanings of the symbols flooded her consciousness. The monoliths weren't just communication devices. They were beacons designed to test the mental development of any species that discovered them. Only beings capable of direct neural interface could activate the system and trigger the response from the vessels above. Webb staggered as the same understanding hit him. "They're testing us. The entire system is an intelligence test on a planetary scale." The vessels above began to descend, their massive forms moving with impossible grace through the atmosphere. As they approached, Sarah could see that their surfaces were covered not just with markings, but with windows, ports, and structures that suggested a vast population within each ship. Elena's voice was filled with awe. "How many beings do you think are aboard those vessels?" "Millions," Torres replied, checking her instruments. "Each ship is reading as a massive population center. We're not just meeting a delegation. We're meeting an entire civilization." The lead vessel settled into a stable hover approximately 1 kilometer above the monolith cluster. As it did, The markings on its hull began to glow with the same rhythm as the planet-bound monoliths, creating a synchronized light show that was visible across half the continent. Sarah felt the mental connection strengthen, and with it came a flood of information. Images, concepts, and ideas flowed through her mind with startling clarity. She saw the history of the beings above, a species that had transcended the need for permanent planetary habitation millions of years ago. They traveled between stars in their city ships, seeking out other intelligent species to evaluate and potentially welcome into their vast interstellar community. They're called the Architects, Sarah said, the name appearing in her mind without conscious thought. They're explorers and evaluators. They seed planets with monolith networks and wait for intelligent species to develop enough to activate them. Webb gripped the ridge's rocky surface as similar revelations flooded his consciousness. The test isn't just about mental capability. It's about character, about how a species responds to the unknown. They've been watching us since we arrived, evaluating our behavior, our curiosity, our willingness to cooperate rather than conquer. The implications were staggering. Humanity had been under observation for months, their every action recorded and analyzed. Their debates, their scientific methods, their treatment of each other and the planet, all of it had been part of an evaluation process. Elena gasped as new information reached her. They're not the only ones. There are hundreds of species in their community, maybe thousands, beings from across the galaxy who have passed their tests and joined their interstellar civilization. Torres looked up at the hovering vessels with new understanding, and now they're here to determine if humanity is ready to join them. Sarah felt a direct communication attempt, clearer and more focused than the general information flow. An individual consciousness was reaching out to her, seeking direct contact. She opened her mind to the connection and found herself in mental communication with an entity that was ancient, beyond human comprehension yet filled with curiosity about her species. The being identified itself as Keeper Valdris, one of the architects responsible for evaluating potential new species. Through the mental link, Sarah experienced fragments of Valdris's vast memory, seeing glimpses of other worlds, other species that had been contacted and evaluated over the millennia. Some had passed the tests and joined the galactic community. Others had failed either through aggression, fear, or simple inability to comprehend the nature of the test. Those species were left alone to develop further, with the monoliths going dormant until such time as they might be ready for another evaluation. What happens now? Sarah asked through the mental link. Valdris's response came as a complex mixture of concepts and emotions that roughly translated to, "Now comes the most important test of all. Your species must choose how to proceed. The knowledge we offer comes with great responsibility. Not all civilizations are prepared for what membership in our community entails." As the mental connection deepened, Sarah began to understand the true scope of what humanity was being offered. The architects possessed technology that could solve humanity's greatest challenges. Unlimited clean energy, faster than light travel, medical advances that could eliminate disease and extend life dramatically. But they also carried the responsibility of helping to guide and protect younger civilizations throughout the galaxy. "They want to know if we're ready to become shepherds," Webb said, his own communication with the architects, providing similar insights. "If we can move beyond our own needs and help guide other species as they develop." Elena was practically glowing with excitement as new scientific concepts flooded her mind. The technology they're sharing, the principles behind faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation, consciousness transfer. It's all here, ready for us to learn if we prove worthy. But with the knowledge came sobering warnings. Species that had gained access to such advanced technology before they were emotionally and ethically ready had often destroyed themselves or become threats to other civilizations. The architects had learned, through bitter experience, that intelligence and wisdom were not the same thing. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders as she realized that humanity's future was being decided not by governments or military leaders, but by a small team of scientists on a distant world. Their responses to the architects' test would determine whether humanity would be welcomed into a galactic community or left to develop in isolation for perhaps thousands more years. The mental connection continued to strengthen, and Sarah knew that the most crucial part of the evaluation was just beginning. The mental evaluation lasted for hours, during which Sarah and her team experienced what felt like lifetimes of shared knowledge and scrutiny. Through the neural link with Keeper Valdris, they were shown the histories of dozens of species that had undergone similar testing. Their triumphs and failures laid bare as examples of what the architects had learned. Over millions of years of contact with emerging civilizations, some species had embraced the opportunity with enthusiasm, but had proven too aggressive, using the advanced technology to dominate their neighbors rather than help them. Others had become overwhelmed by the responsibility and had retreated into isolation, refusing the gifts offered. A few had achieved the balance the architects sought, becoming valued members of the galactic community and helping to evaluate future candidates. "Show me the humans who have succeeded," Sarah requested through the mental link, curious about how her species had performed in the past. Valdris's response came as a wave of confusion that nearly broke the connection. After a moment of disorienting silence, the Keeper's thoughts resumed with something that felt like surprise. "You misunderstand. No humans have undergone this evaluation before. Your species is unknown to us." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. "But we've been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. We've met dozens of alien species. The species you know are local to your stellar neighborhood. They represent a tiny fraction of the galaxy's intelligent life. Most have not advanced sufficiently to merit contact with the architects. You are the first from your region to activate our monoliths." Webb, who had been following the conversation through his own neural link, felt his worldview shift once again. "Are you saying that humanity is more advanced than the species we've been dealing with?" Elena gasped as new information flooded her consciousness. "The Zephyrians, the Altarians, all the species in the Galactic Council, they're all what the architects classify as emerging civilizations. We've been thinking of ourselves as the newcomers, but we're actually among the most developed species in our local region." Torres, struggling to process the mental communications with less success than her colleagues, looked between them with growing alarm. "What does that mean for us? For Earth?" Sarah felt Valdris probe deeper into her memories, examining not just her personal experiences but her understanding of human history, culture, and values. The process was invasive but not unpleasant, like having a gentle conversation with someone who could read her thoughts faster than she could think them. "Your species shows unusual characteristics," Valdris communicated. "Most intelligent life develops along predictable paths, but humans display contradictions that we find fascinating. You are simultaneously cooperative and competitive, logical and emotional, peaceful and aggressive. This complexity makes you difficult to evaluate." Through the link, Sarah began to understand why the architects found humanity so puzzling. Most species developed intelligence through one primary evolutionary path, leading to civilizations that were relatively homogeneous in their approach to problem solving. Humans, however, had evolved multiple competing survival strategies simultaneously, creating a species that could be incredibly adaptive, but also unpredictable. "Is that good or bad?" Webb asked. "It is unprecedented," came the response. "In 12 million years of contact with emerging species, we have never encountered a civilization quite like yours. Your technological development has outpaced your social evolution in some areas, while in others you have achieved philosophical insights that species far older than yours have not attained." Elena felt her excitement building as more information flowed through the neural link. "They're sharing their historical databases with us. Thousands of species, millions of years of development. It's the greatest scientific treasure trove in the galaxy." But with the knowledge came uncomfortable truths. Sarah saw images of species that had destroyed themselves despite, or perhaps because of, advanced technology. Civilizations that had achieved incredible scientific heights but had never learned to cooperate effectively. Others that had become so focused on harmony that they lost the drive to explore and grow. "What makes a species ready for membership?" Sarah asked. Valdris shared a complex concept that took several moments to fully comprehend. Readiness is not about technological achievement or social perfection. It is about wisdom, the ability to accept power without being corrupted by it, the willingness to help others even when there is no benefit to oneself, the courage to grow and change while maintaining one's essential character. Through the link, Sarah experienced fragments of the architect's own history. They had once been a young, aggressive species much like humanity, driven by curiosity and competition. Their transformation into galactic guardians had taken millennia, and had required them to make difficult choices about their own nature. Webb suddenly stiffened as new information reached him. "Sarah, they're showing me the evaluation criteria. We're not just being tested as individuals. Our entire species is being judged based on how we respond here and now." The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. The decisions made by their small team on this distant world would determine humanity's future for potentially thousands of years. Torres struggled to establish her own neural link, frustrated by her inability to fully participate in the communication. "Help her," Sarah requested. "She deserves to be part of this." Valdris responded by adjusting the mental link, making it easier for Torres to access. As the connection stabilized, the lieutenant gasped at the flood of alien concepts entering her mind. "This is incredible," Torres said, "but also terrifying. How can we possibly make this decision for all of humanity?" "Because you have demonstrated the qualities we seek," Valdris replied. "Your team's behavior over the past months has been carefully observed. Your respect for the unknown, your willingness to cooperate despite disagreements, your persistence in seeking truth rather than easy answers. These are the characteristics we value." Elena was practically vibrating with excitement as new scientific principles continued to flow through the link. The technologies they're sharing, the theoretical frameworks, it's centuries ahead of our current understanding. With this knowledge, we could solve climate change, eliminate poverty, extend human life indefinitely. But that knowledge comes with obligations, Valdris warned. Members of our community are expected to help guide younger species. You would become responsible not just for your own civilization's development, but for the careful nurturing of others as they advance toward readiness. Sarah saw images of architect intervention in young civilizations, subtle guidance that helped prevent self-destruction while allowing natural development to continue. It was a delicate balance requiring enormous patience and wisdom. "What about the species we already know?" Webb asked. "The Galactic Council? They would become your responsibility," came the sobering reply. "The Zephyrians, Altarians, and others in your local region are not yet ready for contact with the broader galactic community. If you accept membership, you would serve as their guides, helping them develop toward eventual readiness." The irony was not lost on any of them. Humanity, which had spent 50 years feeling like junior members of galactic civilization, was being offered the role of senior partners and guides. Torres shook her head in amazement. "We'd go from being the new kids to being the teachers overnight. The transition would not be immediate," Valdris clarified. "You would spend decades learning from more experienced members before taking on full responsibilities. But yes, eventually your species would become guardians and guides for this entire stellar region." Sarah felt the full weight of the choice before them. Accept and humanity would gain access to incredible technology and knowledge, but would also take on the responsibility of guiding other species' development. Refuse and they would return to their current existence, potentially forever remaining at their current level of advancement. But there was a third option that Valdris had not yet mentioned, one that Sarah sensed lurking at the edges of the mental communication. Some species had been offered membership and had proven unworthy, not through their initial response, but through their later actions. The fate of those civilizations was something the architects preferred not to discuss. As the evaluation continued, Sarah realized that the most difficult part of the test was still to come. Demonstrating worthiness was one thing. Maintaining it over time was quite another. The test Valdris presented was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of abstract philosophical questions or technological challenges, the architects wanted to observe how humanity would handle real responsibility. Through the neural link, they were presented with a crisis scenario involving the Altarian civilization, one of the species humanity already knew through the Galactic Council. 3 years ago, the Altarians discovered a cache of ancient technology on one of their outer worlds. Valdris explained, the information flowing directly into their minds. They believe it to be a gift from their gods, but we recognize it as the remnants of a failed civilization, one that destroyed itself through misuse of similar devices. Through the link, Sarah saw images of the Altarian discovery. Crystalline structures similar to the monoliths but smaller and more intricate had been unearthed during a mining operation. The Altarians, a deeply religious species, had interpreted the find as divine intervention and had begun incorporating the technology into their society without understanding its true nature. The devices are weapons, Webb realized, his face growing pale as the full implications became clear. Weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. The Altarians don't recognize them as weapons, Elena added, her voice filled with horror. They think they're tools for manipulating space and time, gifts to help them spread their civilization across the galaxy. Torres checked her communication equipment as urgent. Signals began arriving from Earth. We're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sources. Something's happening in the Altarian system. Valdris allowed them to access their communications while maintaining the neural link. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on their screens, his expression grim. Dr. Chen, we need an immediate report on your situation. The Altarians have activated some kind of massive energy weapon and are threatening to use it against the Zephyrian homeworld. They claim the Zephyrians have been suppressing Altarian religious expansion and must be punished by divine judgment. Sarah felt sick as the pieces fell into place. Admiral, the Altarians have discovered ancient weapons technology that they don't understand. They think they're carrying out their God's will, but they're about to commit genocide. How long until they fire? Webb asked. Harrison consulted his tactical displays. Based on their energy buildup patterns, approximately 6 hours. We've tried diplomatic contact, but they're not responding to any communications from Council species. They claim their gods have commanded them to cleanse the galaxy of unbelievers. Through the neural link, Valdris provided additional context. This is the test. The Altarians are about to make a choice that will determine their species' fate. They can still be stopped, but only through intervention by a more advanced civilization. The question is whether humanity is ready to take on that responsibility. Elena gripped her tablet as she realized the full scope of what they were being asked to do. You want us to stop them? To interfere in their religious beliefs and cultural development? We want you to save both species, came the reply. The Altarians will destroy themselves along with the Zephyrians if the weapon is used. The technology they've discovered is unstable. Any attempt to fire it will create a cascade reaction that will consume their entire star system. Sarah felt the weight of billions of lives settling on her shoulders. What can we do? We're just a research team on a distant planet. Valdris's response came as a demonstration rather than explanation. The mental link expanded, connecting not just to the Keeper but to the vast network of architect vessels surrounding the planet. Through that connection, Sarah suddenly had access to technology beyond her wildest imagination. She could feel the planet's monolith network responding to her thoughts, its electromagnetic fields extending beyond the atmosphere to touch the architect ships. The vessels themselves were connected to a galactic communication system that could reach any point in known space instantaneously. We can give you the tools, Valdris explained. Advanced communication technology, energy manipulation systems even faster than light transport if necessary. But the decisions must be yours. How you choose to use these gifts will determine whether your species is ready for the responsibilities of membership. Webb stared at the hovering city ships as new possibilities flooded his mind. We could transport ourselves to the Altarian system instantly. We could use their own communication networks to reach their leadership directly. We could even disable their weapon remotely. But should we? Torres asked. Do we have the right to interfere in their development, even to save lives? Elena was already working through the technological possibilities. If we reveal ourselves as having access to architect technology, we'll have to explain how we got it. The entire power balance in our local stellar region will shift overnight. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the vast network of intelligence surrounding them. Thousands of architect minds were connected to the system, all watching to see how humanity would respond to its first real test as potential galactic guardians. Show me the alternatives, she requested. Valdris shared several scenarios. They could do nothing and allow the Altarians to destroy themselves and the Zephyrians, eliminating 2 species but preserving the natural course of development. They could intervene subtly, causing technical failures that would prevent the weapon from firing without revealing the source of the interference. They could intervene directly, revealing humanity's new capabilities and taking responsibility for stopping the attack. Each choice carried profound consequences. Non-intervention meant accepting the death of billions but maintaining the principle of non-interference in species development. Subtle intervention preserved lives but required deception and manipulation. Direct intervention saved lives and maintained honesty, but would fundamentally alter the power dynamics of their local galactic region. There's a fourth option, Webb said quietly. We could try to educate them. Use the architect communication technology to help the Altarians understand what they've really discovered. Elena nodded enthusiastically. If we could make them see that the technology is dangerous, that it's not a divine gift but the remnant of a destroyed civilization, they might choose not to use it. Torres was monitoring the communications from Earth. The energy buildup in the Altarian system is accelerating. We have less than 6 hours to make a decision. Sarah opened herself fully to the neural link, seeking guidance from the vast collective intelligence of the architects. But instead of answers, she found questions. Each member of the galactic community had faced similar choices throughout their development, and each had found their own path to wisdom. The choice must be authentically human, Valdris explained. We can provide tools and information, but the decision-making process must reflect your species' values and character. That is what we are truly evaluating. Sarah looked at her team, these brave scientists who had followed her intuition to a distant world, and discovered that humanity was being offered a place among the galactic elite. But the price of that membership was taking responsibility for life and death decisions affecting entire civilizations. We need to vote, she said finally. This decision is too important for any one person to make alone. And whatever we choose together as representatives of humanity. Torres set up a secure communication link to Earth, connecting them with Admiral Harrison, the heads of the major space agencies, and the Secretary General of the United Nations. Within an hour, they had established a decision-making framework that would allow humanity's leadership to participate in the choice that would determine their species' future. But as the communications, traffic increased and the political machinery of Earth began to engage with the crisis, Sarah realized that they were running out of time. The Altarians would fire their weapon in less than 5 hours, and humanity had to decide whether they were ready to become galactic guardians or remain observers to cosmic tragedy. The monoliths around them pulsed with energy, their ancient markings shifting to display a countdown timer that all species could understand. Time was running out, and the weight of the future rested on a small group of humans who had thought they were just studying meaningless scratches on alien stones. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Through the Architect Communication Network, representatives from every major nation on Earth were able to participate in real-time discussions about humanity's response to the Altarian crisis. The conversation was heated, with voices of caution clashing against those demanding immediate action. President Chen of the Pacific Federation argued for direct intervention. We cannot stand by and watch billions die when we have the power to prevent it. The moral imperative is clear. Prime Minister Hassan of the European Union disagreed. We're talking about fundamentally altering our relationship with every species we've encountered. The consequences could be catastrophic for human civilization. Through the neural link, Sarah could feel Valdris and the other architects observing the debate with fascination. Humanity's decision-making process was apparently as unprecedented as their evolutionary development. Most species we evaluate have hierarchical command structures, Valdris explained. A single leader or small council makes such decisions. Your species' approach to collective decision-making is unique among the civilizations we've encountered. Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations tried to find middle ground. Perhaps we could attempt the educational approach Dr. Webb suggested. Help the Altarians understand the true nature of their discovery without revealing our new capabilities. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. We could use their own communication networks to transmit historical data about the civilization that created the weapons. Let them reach their own conclusions about the danger. Elena had been running calculations on her tablet throughout the debate. The energy signature of the Altarian weapon is continuing to build. If our projections are correct, they'll reach the point of no return in 3 hours. After that, the cascade reaction will begin whether they fire the weapon or not. Admiral Harrison's face was grim as he processed this information. Are you saying they're going to destroy themselves regardless of what they choose to do? Unless the energy buildup is interrupted soon, Elena confirmed. The weapon system is unstable. It was never meant to be activated by a species that didn't understand its operating principles. Torres looked up from her monitoring equipment with alarm. I'm receiving reports from our deep space sensors. The Zephyrians have detected the energy buildup in the Altarian system. They're mobilizing their entire fleet for a preemptive strike. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Not only were the Altarians about to accidentally destroy themselves, but the Zephyrians were preparing to attack them first, potentially triggering the very cascade reaction that would consume both civilizations. How long before the Zephyrian fleet reaches the Altarian system? Sarah asked. 4 hours at their maximum speed, Harrison replied. They'll arrive just after the Altarians reach the point of no return. Sarah felt the neural link pulse with urgency from Valdris. This is precisely the type of crisis that Architect members are expected to resolve. Young civilizations often create situations that spiral beyond their ability to control. Mature species must sometimes intervene to prevent unnecessary destruction. Webb ran his hands through his hair in frustration. So we have 3 hours to prevent the Altarians from destroying themselves. 4 hours to prevent the Zephyrians from attacking them. And somehow we need to do this without starting an interstellar war. Elena suddenly straightened, her eyes wide with inspiration. What if we don't have to choose between the options? What if we can combine them? She activated the main display and began sketching out a complex intervention plan. We use the Architect communication technology to contact both species simultaneously. We share the historical data about the weapon with the Altarians, while warning the Zephyrians about the cascade reaction. Then we offer to help both species safely disable the weapon system. Torres studied the plan with growing excitement. It's risky, but it addresses the core problem without requiring us to take sides or use force. President Chen's voice came through the communication link with approval. This approach preserves both species while demonstrating our capabilities responsibly. I support this plan. But Prime Minister Hassan raised a crucial concern. What happens after we reveal our new abilities? Both species will want to know how we gained access to such advanced technology. We'll have to explain about the architects. Sarah felt the weight of that implication. Revealing the existence of the architects would fundamentally change how every species in their region viewed the galaxy. The knowledge that there was a vast, ancient civilization evaluating younger species would reshape politics, religion, and philosophy across dozens of worlds. Perhaps it's time for that knowledge to be shared, Secretary General Martinez said thoughtfully. We've been thinking about this as a human decision, but maybe the other species deserve to know that they're being watched and evaluated too. Through the neural link, Valdris provided a startling revelation. The information about our existence is not secret. Every species that achieves membership in our community eventually shares this knowledge with their neighbors. It is part of the guidance process. Webb looked surprised. You mean other species know about you? Advanced civilizations throughout the galaxy are aware of our role. It is only the emerging species that remain unaware, and only until they demonstrate readiness for broader knowledge. Elena checked her calculations again. We're down to 2.5 hours before the cascade begins. If we're going to act, we need to do it now. Sarah made the decision that would change humanity's future. We proceed with Elena's plan. We contact both species simultaneously, share the necessary information, and offer our assistance. Valdris, we'll need access to your communication networks and historical databases. The resources you require are already available through the Monolith network, came the reply. Simply direct your intentions through the neural link. Sarah reached out mentally to the planet-wide communication system and felt it respond to her thoughts. The sensation was extraordinary, like having access to a telephone that could reach any point in the galaxy instantly. She established connections to both the Altarian religious leadership and the Zephyrian military command, creating a three-way conference that spanned multiple star systems. The initial responses were predictable. The Altarians were outraged that humans would dare question their divine mission, while the Zephyrians were suspicious of humanity's sudden involvement in the crisis. But as Elena began sharing the historical data about the weapon system, and Torres provided technical analysis of the cascade danger, both species began to understand the true scope of the threat. Webb took the lead in explaining humanity's new capabilities, describing their contact with the architects and the tests they were undergoing. The revelation that humans were being evaluated for membership in a galactic community of advanced species created shockwaves throughout both civilizations. You're saying that humans are more advanced than we realized? Asked High Commander Thys of the Zephyrian fleet. We're saying that all of our species are being watched and evaluated by intelligences far beyond any of us, Sarah replied. The humans were simply the first in our region to activate the test system. Religious leader Kethvar of the Altarians struggled to process the information. But the sacred crystals, the divine gifts, are the remnants of a species that destroyed itself through hubris and misunderstanding, Elena said gently. Just as we might destroy ourselves if we're not careful with the knowledge we've been given. Torres monitored the energy readings from the Altarian system as the debate continued. The cascade threshold is approaching rapidly. We need a decision from both species in the next 30 minutes. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity's first act as potential galactic guardians would be a success or a catastrophic failure. But for the first time since the crisis began, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. They had found a way to act that preserved both truth and life, demonstrating the wisdom that the architects were seeking. The question now was whether the Altarians and Zephyrians would trust humanity enough to accept their help before it was too late. The final moments of the crisis unfolded with breathtaking speed. Religious leader Kethvar of the Altarians, faced with overwhelming evidence of the weapon's true nature, made the courageous decision to halt the activation sequence. But the energy buildup had progressed too far for a simple shutdown. The cascade reaction has begun, Elena reported, her voice tight with tension. Even with the activation stopped, the energy system will overload in 18 minutes. High Commander Thys of the Zephyrian fleet was still 2 hours away from the Altarian system, but her ship's long-range sensors were detecting the energy fluctuations. Human vessels, can your new technology reach our system in time to assist? Sarah looked at her team, then reached out through the neural link to Valdris. Can we transport ourselves there instantly? The monolith network can create a spatial bridge, came the reply. But using such technology will reveal the full extent of architect capabilities to both species. Once this knowledge is shared, there will be no returning to your previous relationship with your neighbors. Webb nodded grimly. We crossed that line the moment we decided to intervene. There's no going back now. Torres was coordinating with Earth as emergency protocols activated across human space. Admiral Harrison is dispatching our fastest ships to the Altarian system, but they won't arrive for 6 hours. If we're going to help, it has to be through architect technology. Sarah made the choice that would forever alter humanity's place in the galaxy. Valdris, we need immediate transport to the Altarian system. We'll take full responsibility for the consequences. The world around them began to shimmer as the monolith network generated energies beyond human comprehension. Space itself seemed to fold and twist, creating a tunnel of light that stretched across the void between stars. Sarah felt her consciousness expanding as the neural link deepened, allowing her to perceive the transportation process from a perspective no human had ever experienced. In an instant that felt like eternity, they found themselves aboard one of the architect vessels, racing through hyperspace toward the Altarian system. The sensation of traveling faster than light through the neural link was indescribable, like being pulled through the universe by thought itself. They emerged from hyperspace just as the cascade reaction in the ancient weapon reached critical levels. The Altarian homeworld stretched below them, a beautiful blue and green sphere that would be reduced to cosmic dust if the reaction wasn't stopped. Elena immediately began working with architect technology that made human science seem primitive by comparison. Through the neural link, she accessed computational systems that could model quantum interactions in real time, predicting the exact progression of the cascade reaction. I can see the solution, she said, her voice filled with awe and terror. The reaction can be contained, but it requires precise manipulation of the energy field at the quantum level. One mistake and will accelerate the destruction instead of preventing it. Webb was interfacing with the architect historical databases, searching for records of similar incidents. There have been 17 other cases of cascade reactions from this type of weapon system. 12 were successfully contained, but 5 resulted in the complete destruction of the star systems involved. Torres maintained communication with both the Altarian leadership and the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The Altarians are evacuating their major population centers, but there are still billions of people who can't reach safe distance in time. Sarah felt the enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders. Through the neural link, she could access the architect systems needed to contain the reaction, but the complexity was staggering. One error would doom 2 entire civilizations. I can't do this alone, she admitted to Valdris. The calculations are beyond any individual mind. You are not alone, came the reply. Your team has proven worthy of full neural integration. Together you can access the collective processing power of the Architect network. What followed was the most extraordinary experience in human history. Sarah, Webb, Elena, and Torres found their consciousnesses merging with the vast neural network of the Architect civilization. Their individual minds became part of a collective intelligence that spanned the galaxy, accessing knowledge and computational power accumulated over millions of years. Through this enhanced awareness, they could perceive the cascade reaction in perfect detail, seeing the quantum interactions that were driving the destruction. Working together as a unified consciousness, they began the delicate process of energy manipulation needed to contain the reaction. Elena's scientific intuition guided the mathematical calculations. Webb's linguistic skills helped interpret the quantum patterns as a form of cosmic language. Torres's technical expertise coordinated the complex energy manipulations. Sarah's leadership abilities held the team consciousness together, providing focus and direction. The process took 14 minutes of the most intense mental effort any human had ever experienced. Layer by layer, they dismantled the cascade reaction, redirecting destructive energies into harmless dispersal patterns. The ancient weapon system, which had waited millennia to destroy another civilization, was finally rendered permanently inert. As the immediate crisis passed, Sarah found herself back in her individual consciousness, but forever changed by the experience of neural integration. Her team was equally transformed, their minds expanded by contact with the vast Architect network. The reaction is contained, Elena reported, her voice filled with exhaustion and triumph. The Altarian system is safe. Through the communication channels, they could hear celebrations breaking out across both the Altarian homeworld and the Zephyrian fleet. Billions of lives had been saved through humanity's intervention, but the true significance of the event was yet to be fully understood. Valdris appeared before them, not through the neural link but in physical form. The Keeper was tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift between familiar and alien. Its eyes held the wisdom of ages and the warmth of deep compassion. You have passed the test, Valdris said, its voice resonating with harmonics that touched something deep in the human soul. Your species has demonstrated the wisdom, courage, and selflessness required for membership in our community. Webb looked around at his transformed teammates. What happens now? Now begins your true education. You will learn to use the gifts we offer responsibly. You will help guide the development of other species in your region, and you will take your place among the guardians of galactic civilization. Elena was still processing the technological knowledge she had gained through the neural integration. The scientific advances alone will transform human civilization beyond recognition. With great power comes great responsibility, Torres said, unconsciously echoing the lesson they had just learned. Sarah felt the weight of humanity's new role settling on her shoulders, but also the support of the vast Architect community. They were no longer alone in the universe, no longer struggling to understand their place among the stars. The markings on the monoliths, she said, looking back toward Kepler 442b through the viewport. They were never meaningless. They were an invitation to something greater than we ever imagined. Valdris smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both ancient wisdom and eternal hope. The markings were always meaningful. You simply needed to develop the wisdom to understand their true purpose. As the Architect vessel prepared to return them to their research site, Sarah realized that their small team had not only passed a test, but had become the first humans to take responsibility for guiding other species toward their own eventual readiness for galactic membership. The scratches on alien stones had indeed been meaningless to those who weren't ready to understand them. But for humanity, they had become the key to a future among the stars that was more magnificent than any science fiction writer had ever dared to imagine. The true adventure was just beginning.